In this video, we're going to teach you how to make a mask on a long arm with the elastic inserted in it. So we're going to start out with the AC mask with elastics file. So what I've done is set up a design that is a little bit wider than the one that I do with when I'm doing ties. So normally with a tie, I'm only leaving myself about 1/4 of an inch. On this one, I'm leaving quite a bit more than that, especially the first time you do it. Having that extra elastic in that 1/4 inch space can be a little bulky. So I've set up a 58 inch design. And if I was doing this without elastic, I would be doing a 54 inch design. So I've given myself an extra, about a 1/2 inch between each one of my masks. So these are going to quilt about 1 inch space. And the first time you do it, I would suggest to give yourself a little more space. After you get used to it, you can cut that space down a little bit and not waste as much fabric. The way that the pattern is written, each one of these needs to quilt 3 times. It's going to quilt 3 different shapes when it quilts, as weird as that sounds. And I'm going to start out by showing you how to do it one at a time. So it'll quilt all of this one and then all of this one, right? And as I progress across, I'll show you how to kind of chain them together so that you're using a big long strip of fabric eventually. When I'm actually setting this up to quilt and I want to go into production, I can also break the patterns apart and then quilt like all of the outlines, all of the elastic, and then do all of the final stitching. That's a lot more advanced. And if you've never done embroidery in an embroidery project that was in the hoop, I wanted to set it up as a smaller design to begin with, or a smaller concept to begin with, before we start jumping into a big concept that could go bad quickly if you don't understand what you're doing. So we're going to start out with the little ones, but I do want to assure you that there is a way to do this in production as well. Since I'm only doing 1 row of this, I'm going to set my total height of my quilt up to the height I want my row, which is 5.5 for a medium-sized mask. That's not the right number. That needs to be 8.5 all day long. So the mask needs to be 5.5 by 8.5. And I want to be using equal edges, which is the bottom one. That's the one that nails the 2 designs to the outside of your space that you've given it. And then that's really all I need to do. I need to make sure that I have my pattern quilting the right size, that my number of patterns is going to give me space in between, and then I'm ready to quilt. I'm going to quilt this using Quilt as a Single pattern, and it's going to have a bunch of jump stitches, and you need those jump stitches. So we're not going to optimize this pattern. We're going to let it have the jump stitches. And the reason is that it's got to tack off your elastic. So I'm going to go ahead and set this using my 1-point block, which I have set up. So that's a setting inside your settings window. And I want to make sure I have pause at trim lines on. So 1 point corner, and then I want to have my pause at trim lines on. And I'm going to say, okay. Then I'm going to move this to where I want it to start quilting. And I'm going to place it there. I'm going to move it just a little farther over to the right, because I've obviously set my safe area in a different space than I had it set yesterday. There we go. Now it's going to fit. And you want to make sure that you've got your clamps on, which one of mine had come off. And I'm going to start doing this first one. So I prefer to move to start point because it doesn't lock my long arm at the end. So I'm going to have it come and move to its start point. And then do needle down, needle up, grab my bobbin, which obviously I had a huge long thread on. Hold my 2 threads, and I'm doing the same thing I did the other day where I'm twisting it around my finger. It's just a habit I have. And I'm gonna hit the sew button, and it's gonna start by sewing the outline. Oops, and I got it a little off when I brought it back up. It's gonna be okay. Okay, so you can see that it's put the shape on my long arm, right, on my fabric. So the way that I've digitized this is it's going to quilt around clockwise the first time, okay, and it's going to stop, which it's done here. Then if you look at your screen, you're going to see that it says move to next. I'm not going to push that to start up with. I'm going to release this. So I'm going to go to my toolbox and choose release carriage, which is going to make it so that I can move my long arm. Okay. And I'm going to grab my thread, move my long arm 6 to 8 inches away, and then move it back to my hole. Right. So I've grabbed it, moved it 6 to 8 inches away, come back to my hole. I'm going to needle down, needle up, and move it 6 to 8 inches away again. And what that lets me do is bring the bobbin thread up to the top again. Right? Then I'm going to cut all of those at the surface of my quilt. Okay, now when I hit move to next, this is going to move from this point, or from where it's sitting stationary at this point, over to this corner. I'm going to take a piece of elastic and set it right above that corner, and it's going to sew it in for me. So I'm going to hit move to next. And I'm going to do that same needle down, needle up. In this case, it's locked where it is. So I'm going to take a piece of thread in between both of my hands and slide it underneath my foot to catch that bobbin thread. I'm trying to figure out why there's another piece of thread there, and I don't know. There we go. We're just going to hold it there. Okay, so we've got all of our threads out of our way, right? And I'm going to grab this piece of bobbin and I'm going to set it over my line by like 1/4 of an inch. And I am going to keep my fingers away from that hopping foot. Okay, so once I do that, I can actually grab the thread with this hand as well. So I've got my thread. I'm going to do my trick where I put it around my thumb so it stays kind of tight. Bring my bobbin thread or my elastic back under there so that it is about 1/4 of an inch over the stitching line, and then I'm going to hit the sew button. And it's only going to go up in front. It's going to do about a 1/2 inch tack stitch back and forth. And that's because I don't really know what size elastic you're using, and I want to make sure that we're catching it. I'm going to go ahead and cut that so that it stays neat. And then I want to release my carriage again. So it says move to next. I'm going to hit the toolbox, release carriage. Then I can take care of my bobbin thread again. Right. Cut that at the surface. And this time I know it's going to move up closer to the back, right? Because it's going to go counterclockwise. So I'm going to do move to next. Needle down, needle up. Scoop my thread again. Right? And this one's a little bit harder to do. So I kind of pull the thread against this and keep that part straight, the part I'm putting under. So you want to make sure you don't have a twist. Pull it, and I'm going to put it under like that. And in this one, I tend to hold the thread with my right hand, so I'm going to hit sew real quick, and then grab these threads so I'm holding them. And I still want to make sure my hand holding my elastic is away from that hopping foot. So I'm clearing it by over 1/4 of an inch. It's not going to hit my fingers. I'm then I can let go. Once I let go, it's not going to stretch or distort that seam anymore. Okay. And then I can toolbox, release carriage, bring my thread up, cut that at the surface of the quilt, and the next time it's going to move over here. And I tend to move my long arm close to where I know it's going to move to, just because it's a little quicker. Grab another piece of elastic, needle down, needle up, right? Move my thread, keep my thread up, put my elastic under there, bring my thread up, and I need to hold the elastic this time with my right hand. So I'm going to move my, get my thread in this hand, wrap it around my finger, right? Grab my elastic, put it about 1/4 of an inch over my line, right? Loosely hold that elastic down and hit the sew button. Okay, and then I can cut my thread back here. Toolbox, release carriage, move my long arm away, bring it back, needle down, I'm just going to take it, needle down, needle up, move my long arm away again, cut at the surface of the quilt. Okay, and then we're going to do one more move to next, and it's going to move down to this corner. Needle down, needle up, scoop my thread, make sure I don't have a loop in my elastic, or don't have a twist in my elastic, right? There will be a loop in my elastic. Hold it where it needs to be and hit sew. And then I'm going to cut this. Okay, I'm going to do one more release carriage, right? Toolbox release carriage, bring this up. Now the next time this thing sews, it's going to sew clockwise again, right? So it's going to start at the opening and sew back around. Before we can do that, we need to put put our other piece of fabric down on the surface of the quilt, and you're going to put whichever side you want to be, the top of the right side of your fabric down. You also need to make sure that these loops are staying inside the quilt. So the first couple times I did this, I pinned them down or I taped them down inside of there. You can most definitely do that. Once you get used to doing it a little bit, I'm actually going to scooch this up a little bit so that it's close to 1/4 inch off of where it needs to go. You can definitely tape them down with painter's tape, or even if you use really small pins, you're not going to be sewing in that film, that field, so you can do pins. Normally I would also iron this piece of fabric. I haven't done that either, but you see where I'm going with this. Okay, so I did move to start point. Now I'm doing needle down, needle up, and I'm going to grab my thread, hold it over here, and this time it's going to do the regular QuiltPath tack. So it's going to tack off, and then it's going to do a big tack. You're going to see it do like a 1/2 inch tack. That's programmed into the design to make sure that these are going to last when people are putting filters inside of it. Here's the big tack. Okay. And I'm going to keep it flat as it goes and make sure my elastic is staying at where I need it to stay. Okay, so there's the first one. We have one done. And I'm gonna just bring my thread up. Oh, I told it to move to the next point. So it's gonna move to the next mask and wait for me over there for a second. I'm trying to get my thread cut underneath so that I don't catch on it later. And I'm just gonna do needle up, needle down, right? It's locked into place because I did move to next. And I'm gonna let it sew the next repeat. So you can see why I'm leaving more space here, because I don't want this to get sewn over again, right? So I'm gonna hit sew, and it's gonna sew the next outline. Okay, and then we would continue around putting our elastic around. Okay, so I've sewn the first two steps, right? I sewed the outline and put the elastic in, and now I have it's probably about 7.5 inches wide piece of fabric that is actually with the fabric. So it's 40 something inches long, 7 or 8 inches wide, right? And the important part is to make sure your elastic stays where it's supposed to. But once you do that, you can actually sew, and you just flip the material over as as you're going to the next one. So this is like stage 2 of doing this. And you can see me controlling the fabric and making sure that I don't get any pleats. I hit move to next accidentally. I do that a lot when I'm doing it this way. I'm gonna cut the threads off over here, and then I'm gonna go up underneath the quilt top and cut the thread that was bridging it. Then I just pull this out of the way, fold it over this one, and start stitching again. And it actually, once you have it stitched down on the one to the left, it's easier as you go down the row because you have something you're kind of pulling against a little bit when you're straightening it out. So it does make it a little bit easier as you're going. So needle up, needle down, get my thread, sew, and I'm off to make another mask. So to do one mask, from the point of hitting sew at the beginning, putting all of the elastic in and sewing the seam at the end, just under 4 minutes, let's say 4.5 minutes. I am kind of fast at doing this. I've been doing it for a while, so putting the elastic in is not an issue for me. And like I said, there's actually a quicker way that you can do this per mask, but still 4 minutes to an almost completed mask is quick. All you have to do when you're done is to go ahead and flip, turn the mask, and sew the pleats in. When you take them off of your long arm, you're going to cut them apart and then you're going to turn them. So you're going to grab them and just turn them right side out, just like you did when we were doing the ones with the ties. You would do both sides. Once you get them turned and ironed, they're going to look like this. So I iron them flat, and then I iron pleats into them. So I'm just doing 2 facing pleats. So on the back, the pleats actually touch. When I go to sew them, I'm going to start out by back tacking. Sew to the end, back tack again. But then I can go ahead and chain them together. So I can just put the next one on, sew a little bit, back tack, backpack, and I'm ready to do the next one. You need to sew both sides of them, and then your masks are done. So this way, once you get them off of the long arm, it's really, really quick. So the pros of doing them with ties, it's really, really quick on the long arm. And then if you have a bunch of people that don't have long arms, they can help you produce all of the mask. If you are doing it by yourself, it's actually a lot quicker to put the elastics in on the long arm, and then you have very little sewing to do off of your long arm. I can do 12 of these on my long arm in about 18 minutes. Do it with putting the elastics in them, and 12 sewing down this would take me about 2 minutes to sew all 12 of them. So in under 20 minutes, I can have 12 masks done.